hear it or if they want to interpret it for their own benefits, we'll just keep working with them and we'll bring them along the path of enlightenment.
CSL.
We'll bring them along the path of enlightenment.
Well-known Australian company.
Yes.
40 workers at Parkville and Broadmeadows facilities. They say that the policy change has been devastating for their company.
Well, there's no reason for anyone to be devastated about anything. They can engage with us on the labour agreement. They can engage with us on any number of alternative pathways, but the government's intent is very clear. You do not use the 457 visa as effectively a churning recruitment tool, which often then deviates into or detours into permanent migration. It's a distortion of the original purpose of the visa.
The problem you've got here, Mr Pasillo, is it's been very badly thought through. The consultation has been extraordinarily limited.
You have a question, Senator?
No, there's a question here. How could you get it so wrong?
Well, I don't accept your characterisation, and no doubt when the legislation comes forward, it'll be scrutinised by this and other committees, and then we can have that discussion.
Did you anticipate there would be vice-chancellors caught up in this arrangement?
Vice-chancellors are very good representatives of their sector's interests. They are very vocal and they're very prominent. They're very smart as well. That's how you get to be a vice-chancellor. We will deal with their concerns. There is no question.
Certainly most of them are over 45.
Well, and we will deal with the industry-specific or institution-specific concern, both as we recalibrate the lists every 6 months. Ms Noble's already given you that advice. If it continues to be the case that that's contrary to the purpose of the list, we will always ensure that Australia gets the distinguished talent that it needs to do its national business. The government's been very clear about that.
Yes. Is it not the case, Mr Pasillo, that these changes may in fact force Australian companies offshore? Is that not one of the direct consequences of these actions?
Sorry,
You're actually forcing Australian companies offshore?
No one's been forced to do anything. I mean, Senator, if that's your assessment of it, you will no doubt reflect on that and you'll contest the legislation.
We've brought forward an entirely different regime.
Yeah, I understand
because, Mr Pasillo, you have so comprehensively stuffed this up.
Well, Senator Carr, please watch your language. Mr Pasillo is a public servant and does the work of the government of the day.
I think he's not unfamiliar with the concept.
And so he hasn't...
This is the Department of Immigration.
Well, you might mean the government stuffed it up.
Well, certainly that's what I'm referring to.
Well,
the government's policy failure here. And Mr Pasillo has the unfortunate circumstances where he has to represent them here today.
Well, that's okay, but it's not here.
Now, what I'm wondering today, though, is they've indicated today the unintended consequences of the government's measures. Certainly Minister Fifield has indicated that, and other ministers have said this, Mr Pasillo.
Sorry, Senator Carr.
The Minister Fifield, for instance, said to us on the 17th of May that this list will be updated on the 1st of July. Now, he said to address any unintended consequences.
That's what revised lists are for.
That's right, but it's unintended consequences. Clearly the government now acknowledges there were unintended consequences.
I've not seen the context of the minister's remarks, and you can. I'll take that on notice.
So do you acknowledge there have been unintended consequences?
No, there have been consequences that need to be worked through. It's a complex area. That's why we're embarking on the consultation process that Ms Noble's been describing all morning.
If the list is to be updated, you're saying this will be now an ongoing process of updating the list?
6 months, please.
Is this right?
That's right. 6 monthly for the short-term list and every year for the medium to long-term list.
And so will there be a process which actually sees a particular skill removed from the list?
That could happen, or for skills to be added to either list.
So it would work both ways?
That's right.
Senator Carr, we can come back to you on this. I think other...
Mr Chairman, can I just check something? I've just been in a conference with the Minister. Just to be absolutely accurate about the age limitation question, can we just distinguish for Senator Carr's benefit and for the committee's benefit how the age limit works as between the new temporary scheme, the 2 and 4 year scheme, and the permanent skills stream?
That's right.
Could just be very clear for the committee?
For the new temporary skilled shortage visa, which will be introduced in March next year, there are no age limits around that, and that is the replacement visa, if you will, for what's currently known as the 457, but there are very different criteria for that new visa. That's different and separate to the changes that the government also announced, to which the lists apply, to the employer nominated nominated scheme, that's the subclass 186 visa, and the regional, and yeah, that's right.
Permanent.
The regional sponsored migration scheme, which is the subclass 187 visa, and those are the visas that will ultimately have the age limit of 45 years applied to them, except with some exemptions as will apply to those, but also as the Secretary outlaid, there are still other visas and labour agreements and so forth.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thanks for that. Look, perhaps this might be a question to you, Minister, but is the whole purpose of this to give jobs for Australians and to make sure Australians are properly qualified? I mean, I'm amazed to hear from the import of Senator Carr's questions that there aren't Australians good enough to be Vice-Chancellors or senior academics in Australian university. I find that incredible.
Chair, you're absolutely right, and I have to say, in listening to this conversation, I never thought that I'd actually see the day that Senator Carr from the Australian Labor Party, who has consistently fought against the bringing in of foreign labour, would now actually become the champion for the bringing in of foreign labour in this country. To say the irony of Senator Carr's performance today will be there for all to see, quite frankly, and the good news is to read on Hansard, Senator Carr. And perhaps, Chair, what you may wish the committee to do to perhaps further elucidate that point so all can see the complete hypocrisy of the Australian Labor Party when it comes to 457 visas is get the department to take you through the number of people who came in on 457 visas, but in particular for Senator Carr's benefit, the occupation, Senator Carr, in which they came into this country under your current leader, Bill Shorten, and the current Shadow Minister, Brendan O'Connor, versus what has now occurred under this government.
Thank you, Minister. I didn't want to... Hang on, Senator Carr. Hang on, Senator Carr. I'll come to you for a response, in fairness. I didn't want to make this political.
No, of course not.
I was
political in here.
I was going to ask whether this would now allow a Prime Minister to bring in a 457 visa Chief of Staff.
I'm not quite sure, because we never saw the labour market testing, because I think the former Prime Minister,
we'll
Ms Gillard,
you want to bring up labour market testing.
Applications for
Very
over
nice.
2
I look
years,
forward to your
actually
answers on labour market
refused
testing.
to provide any evidence that she tested the labour market. I'm sure, Senator Carr, though, you brought that up in caucus and in Cabinet at the time. You jumped up and down and you demanded the labour market testing, because you're all for labour market testing when it comes to employers, but not when it comes to Labor Prime Ministers, bringing in people that I would have thought you could have got from the Australian labour market.
Now, Senator Carr, I don't want to turn this into a political swing match, but did you want to say something just very briefly?
Look, Mr Chairman, the fundamental question here is there are some industries that are genuinely international, and the research community is a genuinely global industry. It is very, very important that you appreciate just how important it is for there to be global scholarship. And you need global
Minister, let Senator Cash finish and Senator Carr finish.
That is the point about international scholarship. And I'll get to the point about the international education system here.
Okay.
If you want to run this brown shirt stuff in regard to these questions, go for your life. But when it comes to international education, international scholarship, and the global importance of these questions, you simply have to have a visa system that allows our universities and research agencies to tap into some of the best talent around the world.
Okay, thanks, Senator Carr. Well, you've had your response, in fairness. Now back to my questions.